There's something about empty houses that amplifies all the echoes of what once was. I sit here in our living room, the one I designed with my own hands, surrounded by the ghosts of laughter and love that once filled these walls. If this story resonates with you, share it to help us grow the Whispered Truths channel. Maybe your sharing will help someone else feel less alone in their own darkness. I'm James, and this is the story of how the life I built crumbled beneath my feet, and how I somehow found the strength to stand up again. 8 years ago, I met Vanessa at a charity run for children's cancer research. She was wearing a bright blue headband that caught my eye from across the crowd, but it was her laugh that drew me in. Warm, genuine, the kind of laugh that makes you want to be the reason behind it. I remember working up the courage to talk to her at the water station, making some terribly obvious joke about running that she was kind enough to laugh at anyway. She was a pediatric nurse, her eyes lighting up as she talked about her tiny patients, and I knew before our first date was over that this woman was extraordinary. We were married within 2 years, and I still remember the way she looked walking down the aisle. Not just beautiful, but sure. There was no hesitation in her steps as she came toward me, and I felt the same certainty deep in my bones. Nathan stood beside me as my best man, the same way he had since college. He gave a toast that made everyone cry, talking about how he'd watched me become a better man since meeting Vanessa. "To my 2 favorite people," he had said, raising his glass, "may you build a life as beautiful as your hearts," and we did build that life. I'm an architect by trade, and designing our home became my passion project. I created spaces that reflected us. The kitchen with the big island, where Vanessa loved to bake with flour dusting her cheeks. The reading nook in the living room, where we'd curl up with books on rainy Sundays. The nursery that later became Ethan's room when our son was born 5 years ago. That little boy completed our world, with Vanessa's warm eyes and my stubborn chin. We were that family, the one that hosted summer barbecues and Christmas parties, that went camping in the mountains and took photos for holiday cards on the beach. We were nothing extraordinary, just deeply, completely happy in our ordinary life. Nathan remained woven into the fabric of our existence. My oldest friend, there for poker nights and Super Bowl parties, for Ethan's birthday celebrations and spontaneous weekend trips. He was the eternal bachelor, charming and restless, but always reliable when it mattered. "You're living my dream life," he'd tell me, clapping me on the shoulder after a few beers. "You lucky bastard." And I was lucky. So damn lucky that I never saw the cracks forming until they were already too deep to repair. The changes were subtle at first. Vanessa picked up extra night shifts at the hospital about a year ago. A new pediatric oncology unit, she said, needed experienced nurses. I supported her completely. Her dedication to those kids was one of the thousands of reasons I loved her. But something shifted in those months. The comfortable silences we used to share over morning coffee started to feel strained, loaded with words neither of us was saying. She was on her phone constantly, smiling at the screen in a way that made my stomach tighten, then turning it away whenever I approached. "Just work stuff," she'd say, but the slight flush on her neck told a different story. Our intimacy, once as natural as breathing, became scheduled and then rare. When I'd reach for her in the night, she'd mumble about being exhausted from her shift, and I'd tell myself to be understanding, to be patient. But patience became harder as I noticed more changes, new clothes appearing in her closet, a different perfume on her dresser, more care with her appearance on days she claimed were just another workday. She started going out for drinks after shifts with colleagues, something she'd rarely done before, always preferring to come home to Ethan and me. "We should plan a getaway," I suggested one night over dinner, watching her push food around her plate without really eating. "Just the 2 of us. Your mom could watch Ethan for a weekend. We could use some time to reconnect." She didn't look up from her plate. "That sounds nice, but I don't think I can get the time off right now. Maybe in a few months when things slow down." Things didn't slow down. They accelerated in directions I couldn't see yet. The first real moment of suspicion came on a rainy Tuesday. I was sorting through the mail, the mundane task of paying bills, when I found a receipt that had fallen from Vanessa's purse. Dinner for 2 at Montage, an expensive French restaurant downtown. On a night she'd told me she was working late. The timestamp showed 9:30 p.m., the bill over $200 with 2 entrees and a bottle of wine. When she came home that evening, I held up the paper. "Good dinner?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual, though my heart was beginning to race. The flash of panic in her eyes lasted only a second before she composed herself. "Oh, that was Dr. Mitchell's goodbye dinner. He's moving to Chicago next month." The whole night shift team went. The whole team split 1 bottle of wine and 2 meals? She laughed, but it was too high, too forced. "No, of course not. That must just be my portion of the bill." I nodded and let it go, but the seed of doubt had been planted. I began to notice other things, how she and Nathan seemed to text more frequently. They'd never been particularly close without me as the connecting point, but suddenly they had inside jokes I wasn't part of. When the 3 of us were together, I'd catch strange moments, a held glance, a conversation that stopped when I entered the room. "You and Nathan seem to be getting closer," I commented once after he'd left our house following a dinner together. "He's going through some stuff at work," she said dismissively. "Just being a friend." The moment that truly broke the dam of my denial came when Vanessa told me she was attending a 3-day nursing conference in Seattle. I helped her pack, kissed her goodbye, and managed our household solo, proud of my wife's professional dedication. On the second day, Ethan developed a high fever, and I needed to reach Vanessa urgently about his medication allergies. When she didn't answer her cell, I called the hospital to leave an emergency message, only to have the unit secretary tell me, "Vanessa took personal leave days this week. She's not on the conference roster." My blood ran cold as I thanked her and hung up. I called my mother to come stay with Ethan, and paced the house, my mind racing through possibilities, each worse than the last. I checked our credit card statements online and found hotel charges, not in Seattle, but at the Riverside Inn, less than 20 minutes from our home. I sat in our kitchen, the room I had designed with such love, and felt the foundation of my life start to crumble. Vanessa came home the next day, talking animatedly about conference panels that never happened. I said nothing, watching her perform this elaborate lie with practiced ease, wondering how many others I had believed. That night I lay awake beside her, studying the profile of the woman I thought I knew better than myself, realizing she had become a stranger wearing my wife's face. The truth revealed itself a week later, in the cruelest way imaginable. I had a client meeting downtown, cut short by a migraine that left me nauseated and seeing flashes of light. Driving home in the middle of the day, my only thought was reaching the darkness of our bedroom and the relief of sleep. As I turned onto our street, a familiar car caught my eye, Nathan's black Audi, parked a block away from our house. An odd place to park if he was visiting, but my pain-fogged brain didn't process the significance immediately. I entered through the back door, not wanting to deal with the brightness of our front entryway. The house was quiet in that strange way homes are when they shouldn't be empty but feel like they are. I was halfway up the stairs when I heard it. Sounds from our bedroom, muffled but unmistakable. My body froze while my mind raced ahead, desperate to find an explanation that wasn't the obvious one. Maybe Vanessa had come home early and was watching something on her laptop. Maybe she was on a phone call with someone who was upset. As I climbed the remaining stairs toward our bedroom, each step feeling heavier than the last, I never could have prepared myself for what waited behind that door, the image that would forever be burned into my memory. The floorboard near the top of the stairs creaked beneath my weight, that same board I'd been meaning to fix for months. The sounds from the bedroom stopped abruptly. I stood paralyzed in the hallway, unable to move forward or retreat. The bedroom door opened slowly, and there stood Vanessa in her robe, her expression morphing from irritation to horror as she registered my presence. Behind her, Nathan appeared, his shirt unbuttoned, his face a complex mixture of guilt and something that looked disturbingly like defiance. "James," Vanessa whispered, her hand reaching for the doorframe to steady herself. "This isn't how you were supposed to find out." Those words, not denial, not shame, but the implication that my discovery was simply poorly timed, hit me like a physical blow, There had been a plan. They had discussed how to tell me, which meant this wasn't a mistake or a momentary lapse. This was a relationship. What followed feels like watching someone else's life through foggy glass. I remember shouting, my voice unrecognizable even to myself. I remember Nathan trying to step forward, saying something about talking this through like adults, and the rage that surged through me at his presumption. How long? I demanded, my back against the hallway wall, needing its support to remain standing. They exchanged a glance, the intimacy of that shared look, another knife to my heart. 8 months, Nathan finally said. 8 months. While I designed a new deck for our backyard. While we celebrated our anniversary with the romantic dinner I had planned. While we took Ethan to Disneyland and posed for family photos in front of the castle. 8 months of lies stacked on lies. Get out of my house, I said, my voice deadly quiet. Both of you. Nathan left first, pausing as if to say something but wisely deciding against it when he saw my face. Vanessa dressed quickly, tears streaming down her face, begging for a chance to explain. There was nothing to explain. The fact that my wife and my best friend could betray me so completely, in my own home, in the bed where I slept, no explanation could touch the depth of that violation. Have you ever experienced that moment when your entire reality shifts in seconds? When everything you believed about your life is revealed as an illusion? Share in the comments how you dealt with the initial shock of betrayal in your life. Sometimes knowing others have walked this path can be the first step toward healing. The days that followed exist in my memory as a blur of sleepless nights and mechanical days. I moved into our guest room, unable to face the bed we had shared. Vanessa stayed with her sister initially, then got an apartment nearby for Ethan's sake. I became a ghost in my own life, going through the motions of work and basic self-care while feeling nothing but a cavernous emptiness where my heart used to be. I lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks, my clothes hanging from my frame as if they belonged to someone else. In a way, they did. They belonged to the James who believed in love and trust, who no longer existed. The most painful revelations came in pieces over those first few weeks. How they had begun meeting when Vanessa was supposedly at work. How often they had been together in our home while I was at the office or away on business trips. How Nathan had sat across from me at poker games, laughing and drinking my beer, all while carrying the secret of his betrayal. Each new detail was another blow, leaving me reeling and disoriented. When the initial shock began to fade, anger rushed in to fill the void. Blinding, all-consuming rage that kept me awake at night, staring at the ceiling, reimagining conversations and interactions with devastating clarity. Late-night arguments became our new normal when Vanessa would come to pick up or drop off Ethan. She would alternate between tearful apologies and defensive accusations. I had been emotionally distant, too absorbed in my work, hadn't noticed her unhappiness. Each justification felt like a fresh betrayal, attempts to transfer blame that only deepened the wound. Nathan tried reaching out multiple times. "What we have is real, James," he wrote in a message I read a dozen times before deleting. "It wasn't planned. It just happened. I never wanted to hurt you." As if that mattered. As if their feelings somehow justified the destruction of mine. I questioned everything about my marriage and myself. Had I been blind? Had there been signs I'd missed? Had I failed as a husband in ways I couldn't see? The self-doubt was crippling. I replayed years of our relationship in my mind, analyzing conversations, searching for the moment when my wife had stopped loving me. Our friends and family divided like continents drifting apart, some rallying around me, others accepting the narrative that these things just happen, that no one was really to blame. The isolation of this new reality was almost as painful as the betrayal itself. 3 months after discovery, when the screaming had subsided into cold silence, Vanessa came to the house with a different approach. She had ended things with Nathan, she told me. She wanted us to try again. "For Ethan," she said, her eyes red-rimmed and earnest. "And for us. What we had was real, James. We can find it again." Something inside me wanted desperately to believe her. The part that still woke up reaching for her in the night. The part that missed the family we had been. Against my better judgment, against the advice of friends who had stood by me, I agreed to try. We started marriage counseling, sitting stiffly on opposite ends of a beige couch, while a kind-eyed therapist guided us through communication exercises that felt like putting bandages on a severed limb. For a few weeks, I allowed myself to hope. Vanessa was attentive, remorseful, present in ways she hadn't been for over a year. We had candid conversations about rebuilding trust. She gave me passwords to her accounts, checked in when she was going to be late, made efforts to reconnect with me emotionally. Ethan seemed happier, sensing the detente between his parents. I began to think that perhaps, with time and work, we could find a new version of happiness. When she reached for my hand across the dinner table, her eyes filled with tears, saying she'd do anything to rebuild what we had, I felt something dangerous stir inside me. Hope. I didn't realize then that hope could be more painful than the betrayal itself. The second betrayal came like a thunderclap on a clear day. I found hotel receipts in our shared email account, recent ones, dated during our reconciliation period. The Riverside Inn again, where she had met Nathan before. When confronted, Vanessa crumbled, admitting they had never truly ended their relationship. "I tried," she sobbed. "I wanted to want our marriage more, but when I'm with him..." I didn't let her finish. There was nothing left to say. The reconciliation attempt collapsed like a house built on sand, leaving me more devastated than before. I had opened myself to hope only to have it crushed again, and this time the pain was sharper for having believed recovery was possible. Do you believe true reconciliation is possible after such a deep betrayal, or are some wounds too profound to heal? Let me know your thoughts below. Your perspective might shed light on a path forward for someone struggling with the same question. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. Vanessa moved into an apartment across town with Ethan, granted primary custody due to my work schedule and what the courts deemed stability considerations. Nathan left Portland entirely, accepting a job in Chicago, running away from the wreckage he'd helped create. 6 months after the papers were signed, I sat alone in the empty house we once shared. I had put it on the market, unable to live with the memories embedded in its walls. The silence was deafening, pressing in from all sides like a physical weight. I ran my hand along the kitchen island where Ethan had taken his first steps, looked out the window at the backyard where we had hosted summer parties, and felt the full magnitude of what had been lost. Yet in that silence, in that empty space, I began to hear my own voice again, faint at first, then stronger. I started therapy, not couples counseling this time, but individual sessions that helped me process the trauma and grief. I reconnected with old friends who had stood by me, began accepting invitations to dinners and events I'd been declining for months. Slowly, I reclaimed my passion for architecture. I designed a small studio apartment for myself in a converted warehouse downtown, an open, minimalist space with large windows and clean lines. A place untainted by memories, where I could begin again. The pain didn't disappear. I don't think it ever fully will, but it transformed. It became less sharp around the edges, less consuming. Some days I could go hours without thinking about what had happened. The hardest part remained the moments with Ethan. Picking him up for weekend visits, seeing his small face light up as he ran toward me, feeling his arms wrap around my neck. "I miss you, Daddy," he would whisper, and I would have to swallow back the tidal wave of grief and anger that his innocent words triggered. I didn't want him to see the pain that still lived in me. I wanted to be whole for him, even if I was still broken inside. Over time, even the exchanges with Vanessa became easier. The first time I was able to look at her, without feeling that stabbing pain in my chest felt like a victory. We developed a cautious co-parenting relationship, focused entirely on Ethan's well-being. I wasn't ready to forgive. Maybe I never would be, but I was learning to carry the weight of my story without being crushed by it. 1 year after discovery, I met someone. A client who needed renovations on a historical building, whose passion for preservation matched my love of design. We started with coffee discussions about the project that gradually evolved into dinner conversations about life. I moved cautiously, transparently, the lessons of my marriage making me both wary and more authentic. I'm still healing, I told her on our third date. There are parts of me that might always be healing. We're all healing from something, she replied, her eyes kind but not pitying. The question is whether we're doing it alone or together. I don't know what the future holds with her or with anyone. What I do know is that betrayal doesn't have to be the end of the story. The life I carefully designed and built was destroyed, but from its ashes, I've begun to create something new, something different but still meaningful. The blueprint has changed, but the architect remains. If there's one thing I've learned from this journey through darkness, it's that we are more resilient than we believe ourselves to be. The human heart has an extraordinary capacity to weather storms that feel unsurvivable in the moment. The pain doesn't define us. What we build after the pain does. So I keep building. Day by day, brick by brick. A new life. A different happiness. Not perfect or unmarked by what came before, but genuine and entirely my own. If my story has touched something in you, if you've walked a similar path, or are walking it now, know that you're not alone in the darkness. There is light ahead, even when you can't see it yet. The shadows in my home taught me that the deepest betrayals can lead to the most profound rebirth, if we're brave enough to walk through the fire and emerge on the other side. I'm still walking, still emerging, and from where I stand now, the view ahead looks brighter than I ever thought possible again.